He says, draw close to me, close to me, and I'll draw close.
Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Attic. In this video, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode, which was hosted by governing body helper Mark Noumair. Now, as always, there is quite a lot to discuss, so without further ado, let's roll the first clip.
As Jehovah's servants, nothing brings us greater joy than worshiping the true God. But we are also human. This means that from time to time, any of us can and probably will experience unsettling moments, times when we question our worth. For example, have you ever wondered about your true value in Jehovah's eyes? Have you ever experienced moments of anxiety about your place in His organization? Or have you struggled with feelings of worthlessness? Such thoughts can erode our joy, and we might even begin to doubt our personal worth to Jehovah. These can arise from factors such as guilt over the fact that we cannot do more in the ministry or in the congregation, fear of the future, of being separated from the ones we know and love, and despair from being overlooked, feeling that we don't really matter. Disquieting thoughts are real and can overwhelm us at times. They can rob us of our inner peace and our sleep. And if we're not careful, they can even stifle our prayers, damaging our relationship with Jehovah. Nothing would make Satan happier. We never want that to happen, especially now, since this old world is so near to closing.
This old world is so near to closing. Wow, that's a new one, Mark Noumair. I haven't heard it described in quite that way before. It used to be that the world was ending, or Satan's system was ending. Now it's closing, like there's some kind of clearance sale. So yes, beware the world closing, which we know is going to happen soon. We can't be more definitive than that, unfortunately. But wow, what a fascinating way for Mark Noumair to begin the JW Broadcasting episode for May 2023. His theme, how does Jehovah value us? And what he's essentially done is list all of the inevitable results of being a Jehovah's Witness. He's listing the problems of being a Jehovah's Witness, and then the rest of his talk will attempt to solve them. But the obvious solution that's staring everyone in the face is just don't become a Jehovah's Witness to begin with if it's going to give you all of these problems. So I was just kind of making a list as he was talking. I'm not exaggerating here. He's listed as a consequence of being a Jehovah's Witness, or as typical problems that Jehovah's Witnesses might have to deal with, to put it more accurately, unsettling moments, questioning one's worth, or feelings of worthlessness. Who'd imagine that a group that tells us that we are dust, who'd imagine that they'd have feelings of worthlessness? Anxiety, guilt over not doing enough. Well, there's a surprise. I mean, in our last episode, the April 2023 episode, you had a father of two feeling bad because he wasn't pioneering. So he gave up his job as a builder in order to pioneer even though he had 2 young children to think about. Thumbnail here if Tibor is gracious. Is it any wonder that Jehovah's Witnesses are experiencing feelings of worthlessness when the bar is set so high that a father can't just enjoy being a father and commit himself to looking after his family without thinking, you know what, I'd better pioneer. I'd better devote 50 hours of my time every month to doing voluntary work, recruiting people to the religion that I'm in. Is it any wonder? Continuing the list, fear of being separated from loved ones. Another thing that Mark Noumair listed. Is it any surprise in a group that weaponizes your family against you if you start questioning the leadership, if you start questioning the teachings, or if you go against what the governing body expect of you in some way? Is it any surprise whatsoever that people are terrified of perhaps being separated from their loved ones, either because they've been disfellowshipped or disassociated, or because their loved one ends up getting disfellowshipped or disassociated? Is it any wonder? Despair from being overlooked and feeling like we don't really matter. It's an organization that says we come first. Your whole life is about serving Jehovah and serving his organization. You don't really matter in the grand scheme of things so long as Jehovah's will gets done. Is it any wonder that people end up feeling like they don't really matter in that kind of toxic theology?
What do you see here? If you are thinking sand, you are right. Sand is one of the most common substances on the earth. To us, it typically looks bland and ordinary, each particle identical to the next. No color, no sparkle. You never see someone show off a sand necklace or bracelet. But what happens if you look at sand under the microscope? To the naked eye, all sand looks the same and is pretty dull. But magnified 100-fold or more, each individual grain of sand reveals distinct beauty. We see parts of shells and crystals, all contrasting in shapes and colors. There is a treasure trove in a handful of sand. That is how Jehovah sees each of you. Just as he saw the faithful foreigners and eunuchs for the precious gems that they were, he sees you too. Yes, you who may be restricted by age, health, physical stamina, emotions, or family responsibilities from doing as much in some spiritual activities as you would like to. But those limitations do not define you. Remember that in God's eyes, your worth as a person is not measured by how much you do, but rather how much you try. With eternity and perfection in view, Jehovah chooses to see not your limitations, but your potential. When you serve Jehovah, whole-souled, despite limited circumstances, you sparkle in his eyes. And because you shine so brightly in Jehovah's heart, he will always help you. He will always cherish you.
Aw, thanks, Mark Noumair. So we've just been watching Mark Noumair hosting the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode, and he's given us a lovely illustration about sand and how it looks brilliant when you magnify it. And this point is supposed to encourage Jehovah's Witnesses who've just been reminded of all of the downsides to being a Jehovah's Witness, such as anxiety and feeling like you're not doing enough, being on this perpetual hamster wheel of lack of self-worth, etc. He's trying to kind of lift their spirits by reminding them that even sand, if you look at it under a microscope, looks nice. So thank you for that, I guess. I hope you'll all forgive me if I continue to show a picture of you two every time a speaker in one of these videos irritatingly says that. It's just my personal kind of pet peeve. I hate the way they use language in this way. You too can this, or you too can that. For me, it sounds so manipulative and like they're trying to pitch something, like they're trying to make some shady offer. And really, when you think about what Mark Noumair is saying, rather than it simply being about reassuring people and helping people feel validated and helping people feel positive, all of the good stuff that he's promising comes with a massive string attached in the form of the expectations that the organization places on Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's recall where he says,
Remember that in God's eyes, your worth as a person is not measured by how much you do, but rather how much you try. When you serve Jehovah, whole-souled, despite limited circumstances, you sparkle in his eyes.
So it's all about serving Jehovah whole-souled. If you want to sparkle in his eyes, if you want to feel precious and attractive and valuable, like that image of the sand under a microscope, you've got to do something in return. You can't just be who you are and just be valued for who you are. You have got to try, you have got to serve Jehovah whole-souled, as your circumstances allow. So even in a relatively tame JW Broadcasting sermon, because I've actually managed to skip through quite a lot this month because so much of it is just generic, dull material where Mark Noumair is trying to impress his audience with his Bible knowledge by citing obscure Bible characters and referencing obscure Bible narratives. There's so little of interest, quite frankly. But even when playing it safe and giving what you would think at first glance is just a positive, uplifting message, when you drill down and actually examine the words, there's really more to it. And you can see very, very clearly the expectations that Jehovah's Witnesses are under.
In this video, note how 3 regular pioneers came to appreciate their cherished place in Jehovah's family, despite major changes in their lives.
Shortly after getting baptized, I set the goal of becoming a regular pioneer. Then I went to preach in an unassigned territory where Mosquito is spoken. After that, I started serving as a special pioneer. And sometime later, I went to the school for Kingdom Evangelizers. Some time ago, I began to suffer from kidney failure, so it felt like I wasn't doing anything anymore, and I couldn't go back in time.
I grew up in a Christian family. My dad worked in the construction of the Bethel branch, and then served as a Bethelite for some time. My mom was a regular pioneer when she was younger. She also volunteered at Bethel. And that's how she met my dad. Some years ago, I started suffering from severe anxiety attacks, and that really affected me in the congregation. I started to compare myself to others, and I did the same with my parents. I felt I could never live up to their example. I think this Watchtower article came just at the right time. I've learned that comparing myself to others is very damaging, and it was bringing me down spiritually. So now that I've set the goal to stop doing that, I've seen good results. I've had the chance to make good friends with older brothers and sisters in the congregation. And when some of them needed help and turned to me, I was happy to help them.
We're watching the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode and a segment in particular titled Lessons from the Watchtower. So every now and then they give us examples of usually 3 Jehovah's Witnesses who have benefited from a specific Watchtower article. So we're not talking lessons from the Bible here. We're not talking lessons from God's Word. It's all about the Watchtower. The Watchtower is the place to go for wisdom. And we're being introduced to, I'm actually zeroing in on 2 individuals in particular, Francis Pastrana and Diego Gonzalez. Francis describes having to deal with kidney failure, which is something that affects people of multiple faiths or no faith. It's something that people have to deal with, health problems, and I don't see how being a Jehovah's Witness or reading a particular Watchtower article is going to make things significantly better for you when it comes to dealing with health problems. And then you have Diego Gonzalez, who describes growing up in a Jehovah's Witness household where an example was set by his parents. His father worked in construction at the Bethel branch and then served as a Bethelite, and his mother was a regular pioneer. So a high benchmark is being set for him while he's in his formative years, and understandably, he ends up having, quote, severe anxiety attacks. He says, I felt I could never live up to their example. This is another example of where the organization presents problems that it itself has created due to the culture and beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses. This is inevitable. You know, you're going to have people who, as Mark Noumair was saying towards the beginning of his talk, end up questioning their worth and feeling as though they're not doing enough, feeling guilty. It's inevitable that people are going to have these feelings of anxiety. But when it gets to severe anxiety attacks, what you want to see in a video such as this is advice for people watching that if they are experiencing severe anxiety attacks, they need to seek out the help of a mental health professional. Now, granted, I've just given you a few clips of a longer video segment for the sake of time, but I promise you, if you watch the entire segment all the way through, Lessons from the Watchtower, you are not going to see a single example or a single moment where the viewer is told or encouraged to seek the help of a mental health professional if they are plagued by severe anxiety attacks, which I think is frankly negligent. And we like to think that the organization is making progress in this area because at least in a recent convention, thumbnail here to sushi number 389, if Tibor is gracious, at least you had a testimonial from a Jehovah's Witness lady who was encouraged by elders to seek out mental health support and benefited from doing so. So you like to think there's at least some improvement, and then you get material like this, where it's not just advisable for there to be advice to pursue mental health support, it's it's necessary, it's needed, it's a must-have. You've brought up severe anxiety attacks. It's your duty, if you're producing this video, to contextualize this particular issue and make sure your audience is getting the correct advice. And the organization has failed in its duty to those watching this material by, for whatever reason, refusing to say something as simple as, if you are struggling with anxiety, if you are struggling with depression or profound feelings of loss or worthlessness, please seek out mental health support.
Sometimes our circumstances change unexpectedly, throwing us off balance. Has that ever happened to you? If so, pay close attention to this next dramatization.
Caring for the needs of my family is a source of great joy. That was the life that was. One drunk driver, and my wife was gone. Our 2 children had lost their loving mother. The doctors were hopeful that my son might regain the use of his legs. But in the meantime, we needed to adjust to this new situation. My mum was such a support, both emotionally and practically. She helped with the children whilst I went to work. That way, I was able to care for the family's physical needs. It wasn't easy. I don't know what I would have done without her.
We're watching a dramatization in the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode titled Adapting to Changed Circumstances. The gist of it is that a Jehovah's Witness man loses his partner. They have 2 children. In the same car accident where his partner dies, his son loses the use of his legs, is severely injured. And what irritates me about these dramatizations, where they effectively use some sort of tragedy as the main central plot, is that you can overcome these tragedies with or without being a Jehovah's Witness. And when I say overcome, I don't mean deal with it completely. These things are always going to leave lasting scars. But the arrogance of suggesting, as this dramatization does, that the only way you can get through this sort of challenging situation is through being a Jehovah's Witness is frankly insulting.
My fellow elders were loving and considerate too. They offered to lighten some of my congregation responsibilities. But I just wanted to keep busy. I tried to keep on top of everything. But spiritually, things began to slip. On more than one occasion, I had to ask others to cover my meeting parts.
Hello?
Hi, Simon.
Oh, hi, Oliver.
I'm so sorry. I've been held up at work again. Could you cover the treasurer's item for me tonight?
Okay, no problem. I'll see what I can do.
Thank you. I was just too tired to prepare for family worship. And the results were obvious. Everything seemed overwhelming. Even the simple things were a struggle.
The meeting was great. But Dad, you missed Madison's demonstration tonight.
I'm so sorry. I had to work late.
Don't worry, Dad.
Something had to give. Maybe I needed to step aside as an elder. I needed help.
Frankly, I'm sure being in a cult in this sort of situation isn't going to help. That's what, to me, seems to be the problem here. He's having to deal with the tragic loss of his wife and with the health issues of his son. He's having to do extra work to care for his family. And apparently it's all about his failings as a Jehovah's Witness. And the possibility of him stepping aside as an elder. Oh no, maybe I need to reduce my privileges. Maybe I need to step back as an elder. I need to be more spiritual in this situation. That's really quite distressing and concerning, that someone in that situation having to face that sort of terrible tragedy would be caught in this spiral of guilt and self-loathing because they don't feel like they're quite doing enough. And for me, the part that really drove this home was where he sat on the bed and his son says, "You missed Madison's demonstration tonight." It's not like he missed like a parent-teacher meeting, or he missed like a school play where his daughter would be performing and it would be really important for her. He missed a demonstration which is pretty much the only thing a female is allowed to do on the platform in the Jehovah's Witness religion. If you are a female, you're not allowed to do any teaching of any kind, so that when you're going to the meetings, the midweek meetings, and the men or the young boys are getting on the platform and giving proper talks, you have to content yourself with standing on the platform and giving either an experience at the direction of a man, where a man is giving you the questions and you have to answer in a pre-prepared fashion. You have to answer those questions to the satisfaction of the person of the man whose part it is, or you get to give a demonstration of how to recruit someone into the organization. That's the most you can aspire to as a woman in this organization.
Balance comes when we exercise faith. Hebrews 11:6 reminded me that Jehovah is the rewarder of those earnestly seeking him. And James 3:17 says, "The wisdom from above is reasonable." I realize that my family's spiritual needs are one of the more important things. And it's okay to ask others for support. Applying these Bible principles helped me regain my joy. Our circumstances may change, but our Christian priorities do not. They keep us anchored to our living hope.
My mum, and we will be all together.
Thanks to Jehovah, I was able to provide for my own in the most important ways.
What helped Oliver deal with such overwhelming changes?
he became a better Jehovah's Witness. That seems to be the message here, Mark Noumair. If you go through a tragedy, the only way you're going to get through it, including bereavement, the loss of your spouse, the loss of your co-parent, is to double down on your faith, is to make sure you're putting spiritual things first. That's where this guy was going wrong. So again, it's just contributing to this spiral of guilt and self-loathing. Everything's apparently his fault in some way. He should have been preparing more for the family worship, which is what you see him doing towards the end there. Apparently, he just had to break out the marker pens. Apparently, it all had to be some art project. And they needed to depict paradise. They needed to depict the family reunited in paradise with the mother who had died. That's what was going to solve the problem. Giving the children these false hopes, these false promises of being reunited with their mother, if only they'll stick close to this organization. And just a bit of housekeeping. Frequently, Jehovah's Witnesses, when they're defending themselves on the issue of child abuse and child safeguarding, time and time again, they've made the argument that there is no part of Jehovah's Witness worship in which children get separated from their parents. Well, what about this?
And it's okay to ask others for support.
It's okay to ask others for support. And you see there, Madison, his youngest, his daughter, walking down the street with two Jehovah's Witnesses who are not Madison's parents, because they're working together in the preaching work, in the ministry. Isn't that interesting? So that they'll happily depict in their video propaganda situations in which children are separated from their parents and do end up working with non-family members who happen to be congregants when it suits them for their internal propaganda. But when they're facing a public inquiry, when they're trying to spin the whole situation for journalists and for governmental bodies, governmental inquiries, they'll say, oh, there's no situation in which children get separated from their parents. They're with their parents all the time. So we as an organization, as a religious organization, have no responsibility whatsoever to have safeguarding policies in place because children are with their parents all the time. Well, how do you explain that?
Well, my years in school were not easy. Some would tease me, others would laugh at me, and still others would use hurtful words to me.
I felt unloved and not needed. Sadly, my parents refused to take me to school.
The best you can do is to get rid of this child. Just throw her away. That is what my father was told by his friend.
Prejudice against people with albinism can be very cruel. Those who are targeted can be traumatized for life. Albinism is a genetic disorder in which one's eyes, skin, or hair have little or no pigmentation. People with this condition struggle with vision problems. Extreme sensitivity to sunlight also puts them at a high risk for skin cancer. Beyond the physical challenges, they also have to deal with unwarranted social stigmas. In some African countries, people with albinism are even attacked or killed by those involved in spiritistic rituals. This leads them to live in isolation. Tasila used to cry often and feel down. But since she has learned the truth in the Bible, she has found comfort.
What helped me to endure all these trials was praying to Jehovah regularly and reading his word, the Bible.
It's only through diligent daily Bible reading and attending the meetings with our brothers, going out in the ministry. This makes me strong and fortifies my faith.
Jehovah's people love and accept those who suffer from various conditions, including albinism. Tasila, James, and Judith are among those who've experienced that brotherly love and acceptance in Jehovah's organization.
There is a big difference between how people of the world and brothers view me.
This overwhelming impartial love shown by fellow brothers and sisters in the congregations is a source of support and help not only for individuals with albinism, but for anyone who struggles with a challenging physical condition or disability. Yes, mere man sees what appears to the eyes, but Jehovah sees into the heart.
What a mad video. We've just been watching a segment in the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode, apparently informing us that the only way you can deal with albinism if you're a black person is to become a Jehovah's Witness. Have I misinterpreted things? And what relevance does this have to anything? I mean, I struggle to understand where they're coming from with some of these mad videos. And the irony here is if you go back far enough in Watchtower literature, you actually find the organization had some pretty strange ideas about the skin color of black people, specifically the skin condition vitiligo. So let's take a look at a 1904 Watchtower, February 15th, 1904, page 52. Can the Ethiopian change his skin? We answer no, but all will admit that what the Ethiopian cannot do for himself, God could readily do for him. The difference between the races of men and the differences between their languages have long been arguments against the solidarity of the human family. The doctrine of restitution has also raised the question, how could all men be brought to perfection, and which colour of skin was the original? The answer is now provided. God can change the Ethiopian's skin in his own due time. Professor H.A. Edwards of schools in Slater, Montana, has written for the public press an elaborate description of how Julius Jackson of New Frankfort, Montana, a Negro boy of 9 years, began to grow white in September 1901 and is now fully 9/10 white. He assures us that this is no whitish skin disease, but that the new white skin is as healthy as that of any white boy, and that the changed boy has never been sick and never has taken medicines. Realizing that his story would be doubted, he interested Dr. F.A. Howard, Chief Division Surgeon of the Chicago and Alton DIR, who corroborates the statement in the following published extract from a letter. I am obliged to you for an opportunity of seeing and examining the Negro child, Julius Jackson. Apologies for using that word. It's there in this Watchtower. I found his heart action, respiration, and temperature perfectly normal, and his mental faculties seem acute for one of his age. The white skin now covering at least 90% of his body is, so far as I am able to judge, in full possession of all its organs, and those organs seem to be performing their natural functions. No roughness, chalky, or ashen appearance is present. It seems to me that the conditions warrant your opinion. The change is certainly caused by chemical conditions of the blood. Very truly, F.A. Howard. So, Russell who is the editor of The Watchtower at this point, is leaping on a story and using it to answer the question, how could all men be brought to perfection, and which colour of skin was the original? The answer is now provided. God can change the Ethiopian's skin in his own due time. So it's odd that we now have in 2023 a video about albinism where the organization is essentially trying to exploit individuals with albinism by saying to them, hey, look, you may be ostracized by your local communities in parts of Africa, but don't worry, you'll find love and acceptance in our cult. We're the only place where you'll be truly accepted, so come to us. It's ironic that they're creating this exploitative material targeting black people with white skin now in 2023, given the disgusting, backward, racist material they've written about vitiligo in the past.
Jehovah will comfort us if we draw close to him and our brothers. That's the topic of this month's new music video. It's called Draw Close to Me. Please watch and enjoy.
Once I faced my fears alone, now I share them all with him. And he brings comfort to my life, makes me feel that I belong. He says, draw close to me, close to me, and I'll draw close to you. I'll help you see, help you see the good that I see in you. If you draw close to me. He says, draw close to me, close to me, and I'll draw close to you. I'll help you see, help you see the good that I see in you. If you draw close to me.
Sorry to interrupt. I know you were all really enjoying this gorgeous melody, this wonderful song from the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode. This song, which is so moving in all sorts of ways, is called Draw Close to Me. Isn't it weird for those of us kind of past a certain age or of a certain generation who were raised in the Jehovah's Witness organization? Isn't it weird to see how shamelessly they dip into the genre of Christian rock? You know, this could be playing at any mega church in America, couldn't it? In any Baptist church, or as has happened to me, if you get an Uber ride in America and your Uber driver happens to be very religious, they'll make you listen. I've had this situation. They'll make you listen to their Christian music. And it's just unrecognizable from the organization I was raised in, where they were trying to kind of differentiate themselves from all of this. And now they're fully embracing it. And what I find most interesting in this particular instance is this music video is focusing on the letter writing campaign, which really came to the fore during COVID because it was more or less the only way, or one of the only ways, that Jehovah's Witnesses could continue their preaching work while observing social distancing. And they're giving this fantasy scenario where this older Jehovah's Witness lady is wistfully writing this handwritten letter with the hope of it reaching someone who will be touched by the message of good news. And sure enough, it finds its way to this single mother who's reading it and like, oh, this is amazing. I quickly need to check these links. I need to check out jw.org. That's apparently how your typical person is responding to these letters. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it for a moment. I think the vast majority of the letters that Jehovah's Witnesses of any age, including older Jehovah's Witnesses, are hurling at people in an unsolicited fashion are finding their way straight to the bin. I mean, hopefully, many people are using like paper recycling, but if they're not, it's a huge waste of paper and trees, quite frankly. I actually received, it wasn't really a letter, it was really more like a card. Someone had written, on those old filing systems where you used to kind of have, I forget what they're called now, but it was like, you used to have little cards and used to have little tabs and used to like file through your contacts. It was one of those cards, and it was on my windscreen here in Zagreb. And the first time you see something on your windscreen, your heart immediately races because you think, oh no, I've got a ticket, or one of my neighbors is upset with me over something. But it turned out to be a Jehovah's Witness. As soon as I saw the jw.org in handwriting, I was like, oh, phew. I'm sorry, maybe in some situations when someone is desperate enough or emotionally compromised enough, a letter of this kind will reach through to them. But in the vast majority of cases, these letters are finding their way straight to the bin. And this particular music video showing this pie-in-the-sky scenario of a letter being well received and leading to someone becoming a Jehovah's Witness is just ridiculously far-fetched.
Jehovah can give us not just comfort, but also strength. Notice how that's highlighted in this talk by Brother Let.
The theme for my discussion is never let Satan intimidate you. To intimidate means to try to get someone to do or not do something by bullying, terrorizing, threatening them. And of course, Satan is a god of intimidation. That's one way he tries to get people to do what he wants. On the other hand, Jehovah always motivates by love.
Yeah, Jehovah would never intimidate someone into staying in his organization through threats of shunning or anything like that. Oh, wait.
But of course, Satan, as we said, tries to still use intimidation today. If you don't take this blood transfusion, you will surely die. If you don't accept this job, talking about a job that'll damage you spiritually, your family will starve. Why won't you smoke this cigarette? Are you afraid? Are you chicken? Why won't you date this girl in your class who likes you? Are you a homosexual? Today, Satan uses intimidation. 1 Peter 5:8 says the devil walks about like a roaring lion. And often those roars take the form of intimidation, kind of like the roars of a literal lion, according to the Insight book, are calculated to cause domestic animals to stampede and break out of their protective enclosure.
I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure lions as a species predate the domestication of animals. And that's... Stephen Lett's decided in his mind that lions' roars are calculated or designed for that expressed purpose. This is the wisdom of the faithful slave. This is the wisdom of God's channel of communication with mankind. And as for all that unbridled madness about blood transfusions and homosexuals, wow.
If you don't take this blood transfusion, you will surely die. If you don't accept this job, talking about a job that'll damage you spiritually, your family will starve. Why won't you smoke this cigarette? Are you afraid? Are you chicken? Why won't you date this girl in your class who likes you? Are you a homosexual?
Where do I even begin to unpack this craziness? This rant, this confused babble actually gives me hope in a strange way, because some of you may have seen a video I put out recently, My Greatest Wish and My Worst Fears, in which I speculated about the organization getting smart and slowly learning that individuals like Stephen Lett need to be put out to pasture, quite frankly, if their propaganda is going to actually work on thinking adults. And the fact that they've included this mad stupidity in the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode, I mean, it's a little bit early to be celebrating, but it at least gives me a bit of hope. So Stephen Lett is effectively straw-manning criticism of the organization's stance on blood by accusing doctors of intimidating Jehovah's Witnesses into having a blood transfusion. It's not about trying to save their lives. It's not about doctors doing their jobs and in life or death situations providing Jehovah's Witnesses with the health care they need to live. It's about Satan somehow, and it's about doctors being pawns of Satan and trying to wield intimidation on Jehovah's Witnesses so that they say things like, you need to accept a blood transfusion or you'll die. I'm pretty sure if a doctor were to say that, they wouldn't be doing it to intimidate someone or to bully them or just for the thrill of administering a blood transfusion. I'm pretty sure in the vast majority of cases where that gets said in a hospital setting, the doctor is not bluffing. That individual really does need a blood transfusion if they're going to survive. And yet Stephen Lett is perpetuating this myth that doctors are somehow out to get Jehovah's Witnesses. They're out to trip them up in some way. They're out to stumble them and make them compromise in their faith to Jehovah. Disgusting behavior and grossly hypocritical for him to be droning on about intimidation when he fronts an organization that intimidates millions of Jehovah's Witnesses with the threat of estrangement from their loved ones if they question his authority. He's not just a useful idiot, is he? He's not just, a couple of cents short of $1. He is a nasty piece of work. And for him to talk about homosexuality in that way as well. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but people of any denomination, young people of any religious or non-religious persuasion, are bullied with claims that they might be gay if they're not interested in so and so, but that's not exclusive to Jehovah's Witnesses. That's taking a typical scenario in a high school classroom that affects everybody, that is experienced by people of almost any religious background, or students or pupils of any religious background, and making it out as though Jehovah's Witnesses are somehow unique. In other words, perpetuating this siege mentality of the world is out to get us. You know, the shady charlatanry, the propaganda, the manipulation is on full display in Stephen Lett's mad ramblings here.
Now, here's another lesson. Jehovah can use his powerful angels to rescue us from an intimidating situation. In the case of the 3 Hebrews, they were rescued miraculously. When the king looked into that furnace, instead of seeing 3 men bound being cremated, he saw 4 walking about freely. The 4th, obviously, an angel. Now, when they were brought out of that furnace, Daniel 3:27 says they didn't even have the smell of fire. No hair of their body was singed. Now, we've been in homes where people are smokers, and you pick up that smell of smoke very easily. Talking about singeing your hair, hair singes very easily. Some time back, I tried to light a gas stove using a match. I didn't get the timing exactly right. It blew back, burned about half the hairs off my arm. But here they didn't have a hair singed, not even the smell of smoke. Now today, we don't expect Jehovah's angels to deliver us miraculously, but Jehovah can use them to maneuver circumstances. So we find a job to provide for our family. So we find a cooperative doctor who respects our stand on blood, as just a couple of examples. Or he may use the angels to strengthen us, to be faithful in the face of that fiery test.
For some reason, I don't have a problem believing that Stephen Lett finds gas appliances challenging to use, or appliances of almost any kind. Bless him. So yes, more mad ramblings from Stephen Lett, this time applying the story of the 3 Hebrews from the book of Daniel being thrown into the fiery furnace, and suggesting that this story teaches us that Jehovah's Witnesses can expect angelic help when it comes to finding jobs.
Now today, we don't expect Jehovah's angels to deliver us miraculously, but Jehovah can use them to maneuver circumstances. So we find a job to provide for our family.
Isn't intervention of any kind a miracle? If an angel's going to intervene in your life and maneuver matters for you as a Jehovah's Witness so that you end up getting employment that you wouldn't otherwise have gotten, isn't that a miracle? And why would an angel do something like that? So mess with the wiring of the guy conducting your interview, the brain chemistry, you know, just fiddle around with the paperwork or the recruitment process or whatever so that a desired outcome is achieved. Why would an angel do that but not miraculously rescue a Jehovah's Witness so that they survive, for example, the COVID pandemic? We've had tens of thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses die due to the COVID pandemic alone. And there are countless examples, including in this very JW Broadcasting episode, which we'll come to later, of Jehovah's Witnesses facing horrendous traumatic experiences and being made to face them without any sort of angelic relief. And yet we're supposed to believe that the physical well-being of Jehovah's Witnesses is of lesser importance when it comes to angelic intervention than finding them the right employment that will help them serve the organization better.
Now, here's one more lesson we can learn. Remaining staunchly unintimidated will give a powerful witness to onlookers. Do you remember what the king said when they came out unharmed from that furnace? He said, "Praise be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, for there is no other God who is able to rescue like this one." And think about this. If Nebuchadnezzar and other Babylonian onlookers are resurrected as part of the unrighteous mentioned in Acts 24:15, this experience will give them a head start in the new world on taking a stand with Jehovah. And think about even the men who threw them into the furnace who died doing so. Now, if they're resurrected, they'll be told about what happened subsequent to their untimely death. And undoubtedly, that will be an impetus toward spiritual progress in the new world. Well, the same is true today. When we stand firm, unintimidated, we give a powerful witness. And there are many that are now in the truth as a result of such witness.
So what he's now doing is speculating about the resurrection of Nebuchadnezzar as one of the unrighteous in the paradise after Armageddon. Basically, in case you're unaware, the teaching is that everyone from history, good or bad, you could be Joseph Stalin, you could be Genghis Khan, you could be Osama bin Laden. Everyone from history who has ever lived, good or bad, who was never a Jehovah's Witness or never became a Jehovah's Witness right up to Armageddon, but they died before Armageddon struck, they will all re-emerge, including all of these Bible characters. This is the teaching that you have as a Jehovah's Witness. You don't think for a moment about how bloated Earth's population would be by such a torrent of historical characters coming back to life, both the ones that we know about and just ordinary people who didn't make it into the history books. But anyway, Stephen Lett is speculating about Nebuchadnezzar coming back and having a head start due to having watched Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego survive being in a fiery furnace. And then he goes one step further and talks about the attendants who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace, who died as a result due to the heat of the furnace, and talks about essentially how faith strengthening it will be when they return. I mean, just imagine how that's going to work. So your last memory of being a human being is of being burned alive. That's the very last thing you can remember. Throwing people into a furnace and yourself being burned alive. And then the very next thing you remember, or the very next thing you're aware of, you're in this leafy paradise where there are pandas and watermelons and goodness knows what. Fruit tables and smoothies, you name it. And you're suddenly in this idyllic situation with these very recent memories of having burned to death. And Stephen Lett is here saying, well, once it's explained what happened subsequent to them dying, that will give them a head start. That will make it so much easier for them to become Jehovah's Witnesses, just the same as Osama bin Laden will have to become a Jehovah's Witness, or Genghis Khan, or Vlad the Impaler, or the Conquistadors, or any of these other horrendous, barbaric monsters from history. Just going to give them a head start over everyone else, for them to remember how they were burned alive.
Our young brother Elijah was just a teenager when he faced a life-changing situation. Here's his story.
So how can we continue to be faithful in spite of our human weaknesses?
Growing up, I had absolutely no health problems at all. And I loved playing basketball, and I enjoyed my life in the congregation.
This was a kid who had his whole life in front of him, and it was taken away in a moment.
November of 2019, I was diagnosed with a massive brain tumor. I'm saying, why me? Did I do something wrong? I wanted to know why it had to happen now. At 16, I'm close to 18, what I think is the prime of my life. The night before I was going to have surgery was probably one of the scariest nights of my life. So I wanted to be able to still do the things I loved, and I really just didn't want my life to end. The account of David, that was one that was very prominent in my mind. There was many times in his life where he had to fight foes that were very scary and life-threatening, and this situation I was dealing with was pretty scary and life-threatening, but I knew Jehovah had my back.
We're watching the story of Elijah Vega as it appears in the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode. This is a disturbing testimonial. I mean, you have the usual manipulative ingredients of the soft piano music that's intended to play to people's emotions so that they can more easily swallow the narrative that's being fed to them of loyalty to God under any circumstances being the most important thing. But when you strip away all of that manipulative stuff, what you have here is a deeply disturbing story, which in the context of what we've already heard in this particular episode of JW Broadcasting, splits wide apart any notion of divine intervention or God having any involvement whatsoever, frankly, in human affairs. So we had Elijah give the heartbreaking account of being diagnosed at the age of 16 with a brain tumor.
November of 2019, I was diagnosed with a massive brain tumor. I wanted to know why it had to happen now. At 16, I'm close to 18, what I think is the prime of my life.
So a 16-year-old Jehovah's Witness has a brain tumor, and it's life-threatening. He could easily lose his life. Predictably, the blood issue is going to come into play here. He's going to have to make a decision as to whether he wants to compromise and accept medical treatment with blood, even if it may save his life, or go down some other route of refusing blood and accepting medical alternatives. Spoiler alert, it's never really clarified to what extent blood was an issue. But let's just remember what Stephen Lett has said in this very episode of JW Broadcasting.
Now today, we don't expect Jehovah's angels to deliver us miraculously, but Jehovah can use them to maneuver circumstances. So we find a job to provide for our family.
So Jehovah is in the business, through his angels, of finding Jehovah's Witnesses jobs. helping them with their employment so that they'll find suitable employment that will help them attend all their meetings. He does that sort of thing. But he's not going to stop a 16-year-old having a brain tumor. I'm sorry. That makes no sense whatsoever. Or more to the point, as I've repeatedly argued, if that's truly the case, then Jehovah is very messed up. At the very least you could say is that he has woeful prioritization skills.
We talked about getting the brothers from HLC there to talk, to back us up with the alternatives on his card.
The doctor was impressed when he asked Elijah if he had any questions. And Elijah asked him a couple of questions about the procedure and then also brought up the blood issue. This showed the doctor that this was a young man who had his own stand, his own convictions.
If Jehovah tells me that blood is sacred, then I'm listening.
Elijah kept on reminding us that even if he doesn't wake up on this surgery bed, no matter what happens, he's still gonna wake up, whether it's now or in the future, in paradise.
They finally came out only to tell us that there was complication.
Elijah fell into a coma, and we were waiting on answers that the doctors weren't able to give us.
It was roughly about close to 5 months that he was in a coma.
However, Jehovah kept providing the friends, the support. We kept getting texts telling us just how many friends were praying for Elijah and for all of us to get through this.
So this poor lad ended up in a coma for 5 months. And you have to ask the question, because it's not clarified in any way, shape or form in this testimonial, even though they bring up the blood issue. You know, we're not the ones mentioning the blood issue. They're the ones who mention it. They're the ones who put a HLC goon on camera as a talking head, helping us understand this story. And yet they neglect to indicate to what extent the blood issue may have led or not led to these complications that resulted in Elijah being in a coma for 5 months. Why can't you clarify that? It's a simple piece of information. It's a huge gap in the narrative, and frankly, it insults the audience for them to miss this information out, even though they are making a big deal of the blood issue.
The doctor was impressed when he asked Elijah if he had any questions. And Elijah asked him a couple of questions about the procedure and then also brought up the blood issue. This showed the doctor that this was a young man who had his own stand, his own convictions.
If Jehovah tells me that blood is sacred, then I'm listening.
He had his own stand, did he, Peter? Peter Bruzzese from the Hospital Liaison Committee. Apologies if I've mispronounced your name. Elijah had his own stand. It was his own decision. It's not like he was being threatened with death at Armageddon if he committed the sin of taking someone else's blood into his body. It's not like he was being threatened with disassociation if he, quote, willfully and unrepentantly accepted blood, which is what it says in the chapter on disassociation in the secret Shepherd the Flock of God book that's in Peter's briefcase, but that he doesn't show to doctors and medical staff when he's inserting himself in these life or death matters. Why do they need to lie? Why do they need to be shameful about this? Why can't they just be upfront with medical professionals in life or death situations. You know, these are doctors who are trying to save people and trying to assist, in this case, a young lad who has a brain tumor in a way that will allow him to continue with a good quality of life. And rather than be upfront and say, you know, Elijah is in this situation where we believe if he accepts blood, he's worthy of death at Armageddon. And we'll be honest with you, if he changes his mind as a Jehovah's Witness and at the last minute decides that he wants a blood transfusion, we'll disassociate him. So he will have repercussions. Why can't they be upfront about it? If it's something they're so proud about, oh, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, we obey God's command on blood. Why can't you be upfront about the fact that it isn't really a case of individual or personal choice? Elijah was going into this incredibly difficult situation, having his decisions made for him by a group that persuades people to die rather than accept blood.
Spring of 2020 is when I gradually began to wake up. It's way harder to move around as I used to. Super painful and hard. I have ataxia as of right now, temporarily in my right hand. So I'm not able to perform certain activities as well as I would like to. In my heart, I love basketball, and I wish I could participate, but knowing I can't because of something I can't control physically, it's really hard on me. Job, he was always a great example in the Bible to me. I view him in a totally different light now because he was also hit with a medical issue, but he managed to maintain his faith, and Jehovah eventually blessed Job for that.
Since the coma, Elijah's zeal definitely hasn't lessened. If anything, it's increased.
He gives a whole new meaning to widening out because we want to be as zealous and as busy in the ministry as he is.
Elijah has not accomplished any of this in his own strength. He very quickly will give credit to Jehovah, but also will give credit to his family for the amount of support that he's received, and give credit to the brothers and sisters for the support he's received from them as well. He's been engaged in the field ministry, and he's been active in doing whatever assignments we give him within the congregation. We were able to appoint him a ministerial servant. He's got all of this support. He knows that Jehovah's with him, and in that sense, Jehovah truly is at his right hand.
I know that we have a hope that Jehovah has given us in the future, a perfect life. It gives me a goal and more of a motivation to help everyone reach that goal and get there. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So I thank Jehovah for that so much.
Elijah, you are a precious gem in Jehovah's eyes.
How tragic. It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? To consider, well, again, so much is being left out of this story, and it's wrong to speculate, quite frankly, as to whether the situation would have been different if blood transfusions had not been an issue for Elijah. But how tragic that this huge health issue that Elijah has faced, at the very least, is being exploited by the organization for propaganda value and milked to death to get across this message that faithfulness and loyalty to the organization is paramount. And to add insult to injury, you know, you have this HLC goon who's again being used as a talking head. For me, he's giving off very kind of politician vibes. He doesn't really have sincerity, you know, from my perspective. He comes across as a very fake, superficial individual, and maybe it's just the way he comports himself. Maybe he can't help it. But he is describing the whole situation as though it's a win because Elijah is now a ministerial servant. Oh, never mind the fact that you were in a coma for 5 months. Never mind that you've been through this massive ordeal. We've made you a servant. As though that in any way makes up for the fact that this young man can't play basketball, even though he loves it. You know, that was heartbreaking for me. I can't imagine how frustrating it would be for me as someone in his 40s to not be able to play football when I love football, and I'm in my 40s. This young man has his whole life ahead of him, and he has to watch on while his friends play basketball. But it's okay because they've made him a servant. And we're told that Jehovah is by his side. He's at his right hand. Well, where was Jehovah when the brain tumor first surfaced? Why wasn't Jehovah doing something in that situation? Even though we've learned again in this very JW Broadcasting episode that Jehovah is the sort of God who arranges for his angels to find Jehovah's Witnesses employment.
Would you like to see the invitation video for this year's regional convention? The theme is Exercise Patience.
When was the last time you lost your patience? On the road? At work? Or at home? Our busy lives make it difficult for us to be patient. But to enjoy life, we need patience more than ever, even if it's being tested. But what does patience really mean? Does it mean we just passively wait for something to change? And how can patience affect our daily life? The 2023 Exercise Patience Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses will show you what true patience is, why we need it, and how it can improve our relationships with others. God wants you to be happy. And as our Creator, He knows that exercising patience is vital. For more information, go to jw.org.
Think of who you can share this invitation video with so that you pique their interest.
I'll have to get back to you on that one, Mark. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a single person I'd want to share this video with other than in the form of a rebuttal, as I'm doing now, I guess. This obviously is the trailer, the glossy trailer for the 2023 Exercise Patience Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. And there are two things about it that really irritate me. First of all, it's narrated by a woman, and obviously I have no problem whatsoever with women narrating things. It's just incredibly disingenuous of them to make it sound as though women have any voice in this organization. They've done this before in their convention trailers in previous years, where they've used a female narrator. And it again gives this false idea that women will somehow play a role in the teaching or in the educating at these events, when in fact, as we all know, women have no teaching role, no leadership role, no authority role in this organization. The only way a woman is going to get anywhere near a stage at a Jehovah's Witness event is if she's either giving a demonstration of how to recruit someone or giving an experience under the guidance of a male speaker, or frankly, cleaning the podium or the stage. So how shady and dishonest of them to make it appear as though women have a voice at these events. That is a source of repeated irritation for me. And the other thing that irritates me is the way they are so shifty on this subject of patience, as though it's all about just generically cultivating patience. Hey, we're going to help you have more patience when you're waiting for the bus, or when you're waiting for that promotion, or just in any other areas of life. It's not like we're talking about Armageddon here. It's not like we're talking about patience specifically in the context of being a Jehovah's Witness, being in a doomsday group that for decades has been warned about the end of the world, of Satan's system of things. It's not like we're talking about patience in that context, where believers are having to constantly believe that this apocalypse is just around the corner. No, we're just talking about generically cultivating patience. It's just a self-help thing. Why do you have to lie to people like this? Why do you have to trick them? Doesn't it say everything about this organization that they resort to these dark arts of manipulation, even in something as simple as a trailer for their convention? Anyway, those were my thoughts on the May 2023 JW broadcasting episode. I can now turn my attention to convention season, to the Exercise Patience 2023 Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. So stay tuned for those rebuttals in the weeks and months ahead. But that's about all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching.